Welcome to the Once Blind Podcast. Your host, Carlos.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Once Blind. I really appreciate all those that tune in, whether through audio or the two video platforms that I use. It is an encouragement because it is kind of weird when I do these by myself because it's like I'm talking to myself, but I'm not because I'm talking to you. It's a little weird for me, at least, personally. When I have another person, I can kind of look and, hey, okay, have a conversation. Here, I'm having a conversation, but I'm looking at a lens. Either way, so I wanted to do apologetics today. And one of the things that I've been thinking about all day today is the testimony. And it's not just a testimony from the apostles, but how they sealed that testimony. And I kind of want to see if we can kind of grasp what it meant when it said that they sealed their testimony with their lives. They took it to the grave, like literally. And it wasn't just any normal death. It was the fact that they were crucified. They were stoned to death. They were speared to death, burned alive till death, boiled in oil, crucified upside down. The deaths that they were suffering weren't just your normal, here's a bullet to the head, you're done. These were excruciating, right? Where pain is something that we can't even imagine. The fear for any normal human being to think of how they were going to be killed, thrown into gladiator pits, all of these things were a death to really be like, maybe, no. But it depends what you're dying for. And if you believe what you're dying for. So here's the thing. If I were to ask any man, and I'm talking about a man, would you die for your parents? Would you jump in front of a bullet? For your children, for your wife? Some people would say depend on the wife, but would you? And most people would say absolutely. But see, what if I ask you, would you die for a lie? Like, no problem. I'm going to hang you from this tree by your legs, and everyone's going to start throwing stones at you. For a lie. All you have to do is tell the truth. At that point, you're either going to tell another lie or you're going to tell the truth and say, you know what, I recant. Nope. It's not worth it. And that's the thing. What do you appraise what you're dying for? So for the people that we're going to kind of talk about now, they were dying for the gospel. They were dying for the testimony of Jesus of Nazareth, whether he was the Christ, whether he is the Christ, or whether he is who he said he was. Because he said he was God. So it would have to be something that you believe to be true. Also, some of them were just martyred for the fact that they said that he resurrected. Now just imagine that if you didn't think it to be true, or if you did not witness it, you can just easily recant and go on about your life. But if it were true, it's kind of like, I'm sure everyone's had this, where you had to talk to some adult who didn't believe you, and you did everything. You even sweared on whatever you could. You did everything possible to get them to believe you. Now, because that might have not have been important enough for you to die for, you might have not given your life for it. But you went crazy trying to prove that, no, you weren't lying. But now what if you were put in the position that these martyrs were put in? Would you have the heart or the belief or the faith that what you're dying for is worth it? Because he said, he who denies me before men, I will deny before the Father. So would you deny him before men if it were going to cost you your life, but not only your life, but the torture that went beforehand. And before I get to all these great examples, there was one man in history, it was recorded. He's one of the head figures to the Reformed movement. Okay. And they have him in a high pillar, but he was a coward because the first time he was brought in because he was going against the Catholic Church, he recanted. The second time he decided, okay, I'm going to die anyways because they were going to kill him regardless whether he recanted or not. It was either going to be a fast death or a long death. And he was like, well, I'm going to die anyways. I might as well tell the truth. So not every person in history that has been recorded was one of these guys. But when you look at Stephen, right? Stephen was the first martyr recorded. Stephen was before the Pharisees, and he was preaching Jesus. He even went as far as going into the Old Testament to proving Jesus is who the prophecy said he would be. And they were so mad that what you commoner are going to teach us that they stoned him. And when we talk about stones, we're not talking about little rocks. We're talking about stones. They were picking things up to break. And not only was he not willing to recant or say he was sorry or anything, he actually prayed for them and said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Wow. You go to the first apostle, which was James, the brother of John. You had the two sons of thunder. Well, James was John the beloved's brother. James was taken by someone to a tribunal, and he wouldn't recant. He just wouldn't recant. He wouldn't stop speaking and preaching the name of Jesus Christ. He wouldn't stop speaking of the resurrection. So they threatened his life with death. And as they were taking him to death, the guy who turned him in, was like, I guess through his conscience, whatever he was feeling, whatever was going on in his head. But at that moment, he professed to also be of the way. So they took them both and beheaded them. Now ask yourself, why would this second person who turned him in originally say, I am a Christian, I believe him, and go to die with him? And they were both beheaded. So many of the apostles, okay, John the beloved, James's brother, was thrown in oil. By some miracle, he wasn't killed. He then was sent to Patmos, exiled in an island. Peter. Now, there's so many weird stories, but as well as weird things that history has proved. Some say that his wife was crucified before he was, so he had to watch her be crucified unless he recanted. There's no history in that. Whoever wrote it in like the 200 AD, so they're not 100% sure how accurate it is. But what they do know is that when Rome wanted to kill him, he said that he wasn't worth dying how his Lord and Savior died. He wasn't worthy of that. Imagine that, saying you're not worthy of crucifixion the way Jesus was. And he wouldn't recant, but asked and begged that they would crucify him upside down, which is where we get the upside down cross from. Throughout history, there's been so many different forms of crucifixion. Some have been, the T that we normally see. Some have been X's. I think it was, you know what, give me a second. Let me see. James was beheaded. Let me see. I'm trying to remember names here. Stephen was the stoning. All right. I'm cheating now, looking at a book. The zealot. He was crucified as well. Matthew, actually the brother of Jesus, also named James, was pushed off a temple. See, the people of that time respected his character and respected who he was. They said he was blameless and all these things they would say about him. And the church of that time said, hey, would you come up here and would you preach to them and tell them that, to stop trying to follow this Jesus? And I'm assuming because of whatever reason, at first his brothers didn't believe, that they thought maybe. And what happened was that while he was up there, he could not help himself but to preach the gospel and say that all the things of Jesus were true. He got pushed off the temple. Okay. And here's the weirdest part. So now this may be a little weird, but they say that because he spent so much time praying that he had some callus on his knees, like real solid callus on his knees, that when he fell off and he fell on his knees, he didn't die. Most of that callus took the impact. So I'm assuming it was a small, maybe a 2-3 story temple. It wasn't a huge one, but when he fell on his knees, it didn't kill him. So then he was beheaded as well. I'm going to cheat here and go through some of these. Tiberius. Tiberius was the tyrant that killed a bunch of these guys. So let's see. Mark was burned and buried in that place. Mark was the one that wrote the Gospel of Mark, but Peter's account. You had Andrew, Peter's brother. Let's see. He was also crucified. Then you had, and there's actually a pretty cool story about Andrew and when he went to his death and being crucified that I would say you should check that out. You have James, I already said. Paul was tortured in so many different ways before he was beheaded. And again, these are people who, again, would not recant. Again, another Roman Empire took over, or another emperor, I should say. Some of them were thrown into, now, the next generation of followers, they were thrown into the gladiator pits. They were fed to animals in front of everyone, made a spectacle. They were put on stakes. So many. And this was the Romans. And now a lot of people, they will say that Christians have killed more people than anyone in history. And they're wrong. But they're right. You see, because the Catholic religion has called itself Christian for centuries. They believe to be the first. But so many, and the Roman Catholic Church, so many were martyred under the Catholic Church. There's actually one cool story about a young man. I can't remember his name now. I really didn't want to make this about a lot of people because, again, I want you guys to really look all this stuff up. And a good book for you guys to look at is Fox's Book of Martyrs. You may be able to find it for free on some like audio platforms and stuff. But if you buy it, I mean, I bought this copy for $2.97. Okay, I don't know if you can see that on there. It's Fox's Books of Martyrs, written by John Fox. There's one dude you'll find in there. He was 19 years old. And what happened was his teacher, right, the person that he went under his tutelage, was martyred, burned at the stake. And him at 19 years old wouldn't recant what he was taught. And he was killed. You have names like Tyndale. You have so many names. And I mean, that is a great book. I would recommend it to every Christian to read so that you can use it as a tool, not only to build your faith and to see that, the persecutions that we're going through today are I don't even know why they would call them persecutions. The annoyances that we go through today, especially in this country, because we were given the freedom to express ourselves. See, the Protestants and those that were naysayers of the Catholics, they didn't have that. They were being killed. The Queen, who got the name Bloody Murder or Bloody Mary, whatever her name was, how many Christians did she kill? The Muslims, the pirates, so many through history, just killing Christians. But they would give them the choice to recant, to recant, to recant. But now just imagine that. Why, oh, why? If you thought it was a lie, if you were unsure, if you were on the fence, would you go to death? You wouldn't. No one in their right mind would. But now, the apostles would not take back what they said, and they died. They were killed, I should say, gruesomely. I mean, could you imagine watching John, the beloved, be thrown in oil? They were trying to fry him, like chicken, fry him. And he didn't die. He went on to the island of Patmos, where he spent time in exile before, they let him out and he went to Ephesus. But see, this is the thing where when you look at these stories that they left behind, right? These legacies that they left behind, I should say. Give me a second here. Where would you have been in those days? And obviously, we can all speculate and so on and so forth. But in reality, how many people that weren't recorded that did recant? I already told you about one coward. Okay. And the reason I call him that is because he was the main one starting problems in his time. He was so gung-ho till it cost him what he seemed to be so more precious to him, his life. And I'm talking about just crucifixion itself. That's a death for like 3-4 days. There were some that were crucified, didn't die quick enough, so they took them down and they cut their heads off. Yes, I know this is kind of strong, and this is why I don't ever tell anyone this is for children. But just imagine these people, man. These are the OGs, the gangsters of that time. Because who else was doing it? It's like, deny Christ. We'll let you go. Nah. There's actually a story about Peter. And I don't know how true this story is. This is just stuff that was written down through history. But after he was in a jail about to be crucified, and somehow he escaped, and people were and not that he was looking for escape, he just was able to get out. That some of the followers that were with him was telling him to go, right? And in his going, when he got to the gates of that city, he met up with Jesus. And Jesus was walking into the city. He asked him where he was going, and he said, well, if you're not going to do it, I guess I have to do it again, meaning being crucified. So Peter turns around, goes back in, and now that sounds all, cool. If it were true, we don't know. I guess we'll find out on that side of eternity. But could you imagine that? Imagine the fact, right? And obviously Peter would fit perfectly in this narrative because he was the one to deny 3 times. But could you imagine that? Just the encounter with Jesus, like, all right. Yeah, I get it. You prophesied that this is how I would go. This is how I'm going. And just walking back, arguing with yourself, like, oh, man, if it wasn't for my love for Jesus, oh, man. Like, just think about it. And now, many people today have been able to look back at these testimonies, right, and use them and actually convert it in finding out. 2 authors who weren't Christian decided to, one as a journalist, his name is Lee Strobel, he wrote The Case for Christ. As a journalist, he said that he was going to look at that account. And he was going to look at all the evidences and all these things. And in doing so, and all these things that he discovered, he became a Christian. And it mainly had to do with how they went to their deaths. How they went to their deaths. Now, when you read Fox's Book of Martyrs, because I know you're going to pick it up and buy it and read it, check out how many of those people went singing, praising, praying for the people who were killing them. Think about it. You're going to die a gruesome death. You know, I can only imagine how strong the enemy, as well as the persecutors at that time, just saying, just recant. Who cares? Who's watching? Who's going to say anything? They refused to rob God of his glory. They went worshiping and praising. Like, I myself have no words for imagine being there. And then as they were persecuting these people, the church grew. Because what kind of testimony were you leaving? What kind of impact was that making? That you're there. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if people have ever seen the movie Braveheart. I love the movie Braveheart. When they were originally starting to kill him and they were cutting him open and pulling out his entrails and all these, in the beginning of all that, choking him and everything, if you remember, the people were like, yeah, do more, stretch him, all that. But the minute they got to the real stuff, where they did cut him open and started pulling his entrails, everyone had a tear in their face. Everyone was crying out mercy, telling him to cry out mercy. Just imagine the people that were there. Because let's face it, our human nature is bloodthirsty. This is why things like gladiators and sports with violence do so well. So all of them there. And then it's written that thousands, hundreds at a time would be saved from each of these persecutions. Some would still fear saying it out loud because of the fear of the Roman Catholic Church. But some didn't care and they went to their deaths. And this went on all the way. I mean, let's see. Now, all the way up to Queen Elizabeth's time. And then I'm trying to get a date here. Because it was a lot later than... Well, let me put it to you like this. It's still happening in China. But I'm not going to find the date. Let's just say well into the 1500s, I mean. Maybe even more. We know that they were still being persecuted all the way up into the 16s, 17s. I just don't know how bad it was then, because that's when the Protestants decided to go to Amsterdam, and then from Amsterdam, Holland, and from there they went to, that's where they got on ships to come over this way, hopefully to get away from the persecution of the church, as they call themselves. So Lee Strobel was one of those. Then there was, I don't know the name of the author. I know a couple episodes ago I did with Kevin. He had said his name, but it's Cold Case Christianity. And now this was a gentleman who, again, non-believer, wanted to approach the gospel and the 4 books called the Gospels in a way as if he was trying to solve a cold case like he normally would on any murder. He decided, that's how I'm going to do it. And through his investigations and looking into certain things, the testimonies, not only of those, but Josephus and other writers who wrote about all these persecutions and wrote about the things that were going on in that time, the crucifixion, that through all of that, again, what impacted him the most is the people willing to die. You see, for a cop, one of the tactics that they use, this is why people always tell you, shut up when you are being interrogated by a cop. Yeah, I think I said it right. Which, not that I know in person, I'm out of nah. So they try to get you to talk so that you can incriminate yourself. And how do they do that? They tell you so-and-so who you were caught with said that you did it. And then you go, no, he's the one. And then you go back and forth, trying to save your own skin from prison or getting in trouble, paying a fine. You try to save your skin no matter how hardcore you think you are. And even for those of us that come from where we come from and, snitches get stitches and blah, 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 all that stuff, we're not going to maybe say he did it, but we're not going to say I did it. We stick to, I don't know. Oh, but, I said you did it. Well, I didn't do it. So then he did it. I don't know. But again, we won't take it if we didn't have anything to do with it. That's not, it's just not human nature to pay for something. Okay, and pay in the sense of discipline, in punishment, in torture, and whatever it may be, we're not inclined to do so. So why were they? Why were they? So when you look at the Bible, and we did, contradictions already, you don't have contradictions. You don't have anything that you can pick at. Places that have been named there, you've been able to prove them, with archaeologists who were using the Bible to find these places. You have all the artifacts and things that prove it to be true. The only thing left, all science in the Bible, all these things that are in there, you couldn't do anything to disprove it that way. The only thing left was the writers. And in reality, the biggest thing is you got to go for the jugular. You got to be able to disprove the New Testament. You got to be able to disprove Jesus. Because Jesus is the hardest thing for people to understand. Born from a virgin, lived a sinless life, claimed to be the Son of God, took worship as if he were God, said he was God. He was crucified. And then the big bang, right? The big one, he resurrected. And the apostles were not willing to say that they didn't see what they saw, that they didn't experience what they experienced. That's why all the apostles, when they were originally chosen, right? Well, one of them was chosen, but they had to have all been there for his whole ministry, saw the death, saw the resurrection. We also know that over 500 people, were there to see it, to experience, to handle Jesus afterwards. So all these testimonies, how do you test them, right? How can you find out? And the thing is that normally a lot of people, tactic wise, from military as well as, law enforcement, the way to get to the truth is to add pressure. And they added the pressure, and they added the pressure, and they added the pressure. It came to the point where, look, you're looking at your death right now. Recant. Just say no. Nero, I think it was Nero, used to use Christians as lampstands, so he can light up the streets. And yet they still wouldn't recant. They wouldn't deny it. I mean, the Catholic Church went in home after home after home to anyone who was reading an English Bible. The only person they didn't go after at one point was the king, because he was the king. And then he would stop persecutions. Someone else would come in, start persecutions. And every time a new king came in, they went and begged for more persecutions. They wanted to get rid of everyone. They couldn't get rid of them, because the more they killed, the more it came out. And then keep looking in through history, and you will see those that try to destroy the Bible. One of the funniest stories, and this is facts, you can actually look this up. This isn't something that may or may not. This is actual history. I think the guy's name was Voltaire. I don't know. It always reminds me of Voldemort. Yes, I do know what that movie is. So anyways, Voltaire wanted to get rid of every single Bible. And he worked hard, burning them, searching them out. Didn't want anyone. I mean, he worked really hard. When he died, they turned his house into a printing press for Bibles. Now, if you don't think God has a sense of humor, that's funny. I don't care who you are. That's funny. So, again, I didn't want to go too deep into a lot of these guys because I want you guys to search these out for yourselves. Look into the history because there is factual evidence that we can look upon so that we can stand strong and have an answer for the hope that is within us. Remember, there is answers. We weren't left with nothing. We have enough things to bank on and enough things to defend our faith in and out of season. And another book, since I've recommended one for you guys, by the same people who published this Fox book, Martyrs, and I just don't know any Christian that hasn't read, but if you haven't, you should read Pilgrim's Progress. These are two small books, tiny, great. Pilgrim's Progress is a little bit interesting if you go get the older English one. It's actually a lot better than the translated version. The translated version loses a lot, but I really like Pilgrim's Progress. I recommend this to a lot of new believers, and read both. Well, read this one specifically with your Bible so that you kind of understand what's going on, because it's really taking you through the roles of many things that you go through in your walk. So that's apologetics for you guys. Please do a little work, do a little history. You've seen how cheap those books are. I don't get a profit from it, so it's not like I'm recommending books that I make money off of. In fact, guys, if you want to, these are the two books I said. You want to send me? No, I'm kidding. Either way, check the books out. Look into your history. And think about it. Would you die for a lie? God bless you guys.
Thank you for dropping by. Please remember to subscribe, to share, like, and to catch the next one.